Hello everyone, this is Woman Grandmaster Sabina Foishor. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. For today, I've decided to start a new series, and not to forget, I'm still going to continue the beginner series, but it's important to try to create content for all of my viewers, and I think a lot of you will be able to enjoy this series where I'm going to be sharing some of my best and worst games played. To get us started, I've chosen my first win against a women's Grandmaster and International Master, and it happened in 2003. I was 14 years old and I was playing against Elena Sedina. At that time, I was rated 2087 while she was 2394, and I was playing for team for Frauenbundesliga. Actually, it was Women's Bundesliga, and it was called Doppelbauer Kiel. I really enjoyed playing for that team, and it was so exciting to I was so excited to be given this opportunity that I really wanted to try my best to win this game for the team. And I started with my d4. d4 has been my main repertoire for quite some time, and my opponent was known to be a tactical player, and she continued knight f6, c4, c5. So now, after d5, black has two main choices. One is to play b5 and go for the Benko or Volga gambit. The other one is to try to transpose onto a Benoni. She went for b5, and I was prepared for this, and I remember at the time this was one of my favorite lines to play against. So I was super excited to capture the pawn. C takes b5, a takes b5, a6, b takes a6, and now g6. So black gives up a pawn in this gambit for the purpose of trying to get some activity on the a and b files, but also to try to develop their pieces a little bit faster with tempo. So it is very important to choose a system with white. You take the pawn, but you will have to defend for a little bit. Otherwise, well, black is going to be able to capture their pawn back. So I went knight c3, bishop takes a6. Now, it is important, in my opinion, when white plays knight to c3, for black to capture in a6. Because what is happening? When white plays knight c3, they control the center, and they want to be ready to play e4, strengthen their center, and then, of course, develop their bishop in f1 and continue their development on the king side. So this is the right moment for black to capture in a6. The idea being that if you're going to play e4, black can trade off the light square bishop and not allow white to castle anymore. Now, this is a pretty played line. If you're playing this with either colors, white or black, you definitely need to look into this line. It's very theoretical, and ideas involve, of course, bringing the king to safety and then finishing your development. But this is not what I chose to play in that game. I thought it is important for me to be more cautious a little bit, and I chose a positional line. So I played g3 in this position. My idea is to first develop my bishop in g2, develop my knight as well, castle, and later I will take my queen out. Typically c2 is the right place for the queen. The rook would go to d1, and then white is going to take control over the center with e4. So I'm not in a rush to play e4 if I'm going to develop my pieces in such a way to protect the d5 pawn, which becomes pretty weak if you're not going to be able to play e4. So in this position, my opponent played the typical d6. I developed, she developed, knight to f3, knight b d7. Now here, for those of you who are going to play this with white, you have to be very, very careful. Black has this idea of knight b6, with which not only do they put pressure on the pawn in d5, but in the same time, they're controlling the c4 square for a potential knight going there, and also, at times, they could play c4, and by pushing this pawn, they would not allow you to push your b pawn, which is going to make it difficult for the development of your bishop in c1. Also, let us point out that in the Benko, black does have that very strong bishop in g7 that can be very annoying at times, especially if this knight from f6 gets to move. White is going to have some trouble pushing the b pawn. So in this moment, in my opinion, it is very, very important to play rook b1 in order to meet knight b6, which is what my opponent played, with b3. This is a move that restricts black's knight. Sometimes my arrows are disturbing me that I'm not able to make them. So b3 will restrict the knight in b6. And now, well, black has to continue with another plan. But this is something very important. And we do this maneuver, or it's not really a maneuver, just this development pretty soon before black has moved the knight from f6 and opened up their bishop. So black typically, these days I think there's this idea where black actually goes back to c8 and tries to come to f5 to take advantage of the rook being on a light square. But that is not something that was played in those times, at least not to my knowledge. So my opponent decided to put pressure on d5. This is one of the main ideas. And as you can see, it was pretty important for me to have my bishop in g2, since I'm not going to be able to play e4, because imagine if we go for e4 now, black just returns to a6, and it's fine to go back and forth if you're going to restrict your opponent from doing something important. So I didn't go for e4, I went for knight h4 in this position. The idea is, of course, to protect my pawn in d5 once again, but it doesn't look so beautiful with the knight having to stay on the edge of the board. But not to worry, this knight can come into play a little bit later. But first we have to be focusing on the development. Black castled, and so did I. And in this position, my opponent, Women's Grandmaster Sedina, Elena, went for knight e8. This is a very typical maneuver in the Benoni as well, for those of you who played. You're opening up your bishop in g7, but in the same time, you're thinking bringing the knight to c7 instead. That way, the knight is still attacking d5, but leaving this bishop in g7 completely opened. Not just that, in some cases, f5 is for sure something that black can consider. And either if white has a pawn in e4, it breaks white's center. If white does not have a pawn in e4, in that case, the move is simply play to give black a little bit more space and maybe attack. And here, I probably just relied on my knowledge. I didn't really think it through, and I went for queen c2, being familiar with the idea of bringing the rook to d1 and maybe playing e4 afterwards. And of course, I needed to protect my knight. But I think more natural, and this day maybe I would play this instead, would be bishop b2. White does need to develop that dark square bishop eventually, and after knight c7, for example, I could go e4. And if black would like to create some ideas for themselves, they would have to get their pawn back, but with doing so, they would give up their protecting bishop. So now they can take in a2, and I think that probably was the reason why I didn't want to play this. But here, considering that black did give up the bishop in g7, I could go queen c1 and then try to get my queen for an attack, attracting this move f6, which is going to weaken a little bit black's position. And then I could kind of switch between the two sides. Considering black is a little bit passive with these pieces, I could consider playing maybe b4 at some point and open the position or attack on both sides. But I chose in the game to go for queen c2. And after queen c2, my opponent continued her plan with knight c7, very natural. Now I have to protect d5, and I played e4 and e6. Breaking white's center is very important. Although black has sacrificed a pawn and does have some activity on the a file, that is not enough. A pawn is a pawn, and you really have to try to make as many moves with tempo as you can. So e6, putting a little bit more pressure on my pawn d5, so I decided to go rook d1. Takes And here, this is a moment where I recaptured with the pawn. Now, after the game, I was thinking, why didn't I take with the knight? But really, I don't believe this would have been a good choice because black can just capture with this knight. Then I recapture with a pawn, right? So they did trade a piece, and considering their lack of space, that can only be in their favor. And now black can play knight to b5, activating their knight and looking to go towards d4, also maybe a3 if white is going to develop the bishop, and more importantly, knight c3. So white has to be really careful, and I think, after analyzing the game, at that time I realized, wait a second, that is not such a great thing to do. So I did capture with the pawn, and my opponent went for rook e8. More recently, black has actually tried f5 in this position, trying to get a little bit more space and keep the control over the e4 square, which I don't think is so important now. And though in a game that I saw recently, which was played between, it wasn't actually so recent, it was an older game, but white tried bishop to b2, but I think b4 is a really nice idea for white here, because this is a place where you really want to open up the position and take advantage of these two pieces being placed on the same file. My opponent avoided that idea somewhat, but I still could have played it. However, at the time, I think I had an idea in mind of what I should do, and I just tried to follow that instead of thinking of something else. You may notice that I'm pointing things out that I thought then, and then how I'm thinking now. And the reason I'm able to do that, guys, is that I actually have annotated my games. I don't know how many of you do that, but I believe it's very important. Put some notes on your games after you play them, because you never know when you might want to go back and remind yourself, what is it that I was thinking in this position? Why did I play this? You can go back years later and realize, wait a second, like what, why? And then you have your notes and you can look back and compare and see where is your problem? Why aren't you improving? It can help you. Sometimes you can have these great games and you can wonder, why is it that I don't play so well anymore? I started playing badly. And I think it can be inspirational for yourself. You don't always need to have a person that inspires you. Sometimes you can simply get inspiration from yourself. What were you thinking then? You were younger, you're passionate, this and that, and then hopefully things come back to you. So anyways, in this position, I played bishop b2 because I thought I should develop my pieces. But a very interesting idea for those of you who might consider playing this is playing bishop f3, and then maybe retreating with the knight in g2. This is kind of an interesting idea that you can consider. But anyways, I went bishop b2. I thought, it made sense. So my opponent played queen d7. Just a regular development move. And I played a4. This is an idea that I had seen, I remember, and I thought it is really great. By pushing this a pawn, now white kind of tells black's rook in a8, sorry, you don't have anything to do anymore, while pushing a pawn forward to promotion. And in the same time, kind of trying to get this b5 square for the knight. That would be an ideal situation for white. My opponent played f5, and here I played a move that was going to define me as a player. I don't know if that makes sense at all. It became one of my favorite moves as a kid. I remember that. But it was a terrible, terrible move. It was a mistake, just because once you win a game and you think it was perfect because you won, please analyze it and make sure that you are right. And if a move doesn't seem right, try to find a way to improve for the future. Don't take every game won as granted. So in this position, the worst placed piece for white is this knight in h4, and it definitely needs some improvement. It can go, as I mentioned, with bishop f3 and knight g2, and then maybe bring the knight to f4. Another idea would be to just retreat with the knight in f3 and consider going towards g5, because this is a potential outpost that the knight has. c4 is another outpost that white has. The queen in c2 doesn't do anything anymore, so it can actually be moved towards d2. There are so many options that I have here with white to improve my position, because black's attack and moves with tempo have kind of fizzled away. But instead of doing that, I tried to play against my opponent's time trouble. I remember she was really low on time, and I thought if I start attacking her, she might end up making some mistakes. Well, it worked out, but it was not a good idea. g4. So I'm not very happy with this move in this particular position, because it simply allows the capture of the pawn. And I was thinking to go ahead and sacrifice my knight as well. But guys, how many pieces do I have that actually get to attack? Yeah, indeed, I have this bishop that can come to e4, but it's not going to be sufficient. Plus, black can just play queen f7, trade off my queen, and then I've just sacrificed material for nothing. So, thankfully for me, my opponent did not go for that. She went for queen e7, though this is a good move as well. Just an intermediate move with tempo and attacking my knight, and now I need to do something. And I went for it. What do you guys think? I mean, if you're going to go for an attack, you might as well just go on all in, I guess. At least at that age, that's what I thought. So I went knight f5, knight takes f5, she recaptured, queen takes f5. And in this position, if you're running your engines, it would probably tell you white is completely lost. That's simple. I mean, yes, we do have 3 pawns for the piece, but white has weakened the center a little bit. This pawn is not doing so great. There are ideas with bishop d4 for black to improve, come on the f-file, and just because bishop e4 is something that white has as a potential idea, that's not going to be enough. Besides, rook f8 can be played just to chase the queen away from there, and then white's attack is going to be gone forever. Now the next few moves are pretty good for black, but probably not the best. My opponent tried to play bishop c8, supposedly improve the position of her bishop, but I was happy to get my queen a little bit more like closer to black's king. Knight d7, and here I had some ideas actually with knight d7 trying to come to defend a little bit black's king. I could have an idea to play knight e4 and then maybe try to bring the knight towards g5, but in the same time maybe trade the dark square's bishops. And then I also had this idea that I was thinking about, just how to bring pieces. But boy, did I not think about about really how long that would take. I did not think about it. So when my opponent played knight g7, I thought, well, I have to stop that. So I went for g5 instead, which again wasn't the best choice. Knight e5, a very good move. Then I play bishop e4, and my opponent played bishop h8. But I think h6 here also works very well, because I cannot just take. I mean, I would love to take, but there's this issue, huge issue. And the biggest issue is the fact that my queen is trapped. So that wouldn't quite work. So h6 for sure would kind of stop all white's attacks, and this threatening queen takes g5, just trade the queens. It's really not easy for white. After bishop h8, rook e1, bishop g4, I thought I'm still doing okay with my queen in h6. But once again, thankfully, my opponent's time has played an important role in the result of this position. After h3, my opponent just blundered. She ended up moving her bishop to f5, after which I start having some interesting ideas that are harder to defend by black. Instead, I think bishop g7 would just seal the deal for black. I have to take in g6 or else my queen is trapped. H takes g6. Now queen h4, of course, trying to retreat. And now black can simply move this bishop pretty much anywhere, bishop f3 or bishop f5, and then that attack is gone and black stays with the extra piece. Plus, white's king is the one who's going to become weaker. But she played bishop f5, and slowly, after rook f3, black ends up getting a worse position. Now she played bishop g7. Now once again, she could have played rook to e5 to protect her bishop, and I don't know how to put more pressure here. It just seems completely blocked. But she went bishop g7 first, which allowed queen h5, and now knight e5. Now this was the real blunder. Bishop f5 was just the whole idea didn't seem to work so well because it still allowed white some activity, but here knight e5 was for sure a move that changes the course of the game. Black would have still maintained advantage with rook e5. So after knight e5, I suggest you to take a moment to pause the video and try to find what I did here, though it's not so difficult. I played queen takes f7. And after knight takes f7, bishop takes f5, white is basically getting their piece back and stays with 3 extra pawns. So this is what happened. And though black takes one back, now there's rook g3. And it's going to look very bad for black. h6, now I went for h4. And what to do? Retreating here doesn't quite work because I have a beautiful, I think I have many ways actually to win, but my way that I annotated at that time was rook takes g7, and now knight b5 check. Black has to go knight e5, and now I'm finishing with this beautiful knight takes c7, completely winning. Instead, my opponent played rook f8, and now I took the knight, bishop takes c3, and now I took intermediate in h6, and black resigned. So this was my game that I won, my first win against the Women's Grandmaster. I was pretty proud of myself at that time, I remember. And what stayed into my mind was this move g4, that although was a horrible move in that specific position, it was the move that I think kind of, I don't know, deconcentrated my opponent, destabilized her. I'm not sure. She was and she still is a great chess player, female chess player, and I'm really thankful to have won this game. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and looking forward to making more. Have a wonderful week, and see you in my next video.